Okay, I'd like to call the finance meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the assignment of requests for council action or discussion. For the Finance Committee, we have the 12037, the municipal tax refund, 12038, the 2002 debt issue refinancing, 12039, budget amendments, 12040, the Community Improvement Corporation, CIC, from the ED Department, 12041, the purchase agreement for 406 South Broadway Street, 12042, the entertainment sponsor for Medina County Senior Day, and 12043, safety zone / railroad crossing gates at Guilford Boulevard. The first item on the agenda then is the addendum to 12011, the police department reorganization. The chief here?
He's not. He's ill tonight, sir.
Okay.
I can take care of that though for him. Basically, what we're asking is if council would be okay with modifying that instead of doing away with all 4 part-time dispatchers. Right now, we only have one of those filled. But since our last meeting, we had a dispatcher resign and another one taking FMLA leave. And with the remainder that we have, we don't have the coverage if we eliminate this one part-time slot now. So the other thing we're thinking is that there may be one of these full-time dispatchers now or in the future that may decide to take employment elsewhere. But if they're a good dispatcher for us and would still like to stay on part-time, that we may be able to fill some gaps with that. So
currently we have how many full-time dispatchers? Is there 8 because of the shifts?
No, there's more than that. I think by code we're allowed, it's either 9 or 10.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head, but we don't have all of those filled. Right now we had 8 filled and then 1 left. One resigned and 1 is on FMLA and the remainder 6. That's different.
And what we're going to do is eliminate all part-time communications operators to have it 0.
Yes.
And what he's requesting now, instead of eliminating all 4 part-time positions that we have on the books, is to eliminate 2 of the 4, so he has, if he needs it, to be able to hire up to 2 part-time positions to be filled if a full-time leaves or to get the flexibility.
Yes, sir.
And also, the one change that I think that's reflected in the council, the emergency clause, was implemented with respect to the police department reorganization, and with the civil service requested that. I don't think we're able to do the emergency clause on that.
Well, we did. Actually, the original was not.
Oh, was it on it?
The very first time when we were asking about the pension pickup, it included the emergency clause, and then when we resubmitted it, I asked them not to include it.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the modification to, the elimination of certain positions, the addition now of 2 of the part-time communications operators adding them back in, but still maintaining the 1 administrative assistant position and also the 3 additional patrol officer part-time positions? Anybody?
How many part-time communications operators would we have? How many? Just 2? We would have 2 then with the communications operator?
Currently, we have 1 position filled, and we would not even fill the second unless the right person came along or somebody resigned that was doing a good job for us. We wanted to hang on at least to fill some shifts.
Okay.
And if you recall, he still has to be within his budget, so I don't know.
Right.
Right. I just want to make sure how many we had allotted.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion to amend it from instead of eliminating 4 to just eliminating 2, so it's 2 remain part-time.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Item number 3, 12028, the design and engineering for Mallard Park improvements. Is this Pat or Tim or which one is it?
Yeah. The city was awarded last year neighborhood improvement for Mallard Park through their CDBG program. This improvements include a splash pad, water plate, what's it called, splash pad? Yeah. Okay. A trail, a fitness trail around the park, and some other improvements, some lighting, security camera, that kind of thing. For the trail in the splash pad, we did, as required, a qualification-based selection process. From that process, 3 consultants submitted. We reviewed their qualifications and determined that the team, including myself, Tim, and a couple members, staff members of the Park Direct Department, deal with the operation, maintenance, of splash pad and pools. The branch there, Carroll, was the most qualified. So we began a negotiation process with them and coming to today to ask that we offer them a contract. The final dollar amount is $24,280. They will design the splash pad, prepare the bid documents, do a conceptual master plan for the park improvements. I'd like to go with them.
Any other, Tim, anything to add? Anybody on council have any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You know, we frequently hear we determine so-and-so to be the most qualified. What do you base that on?
Well, we had each of us rated the consultants and submitted, just so you know the process that for this type of work, the state law, you can't award it to the low bidder. You have to prioritize, you have to put them in order as you think the most qualified. We went with experience. We called their references. Those are the 2 biggest. That the personnel that they used, the staff that were dedicated to the project, what kind of experience they had, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
I just an estimated timeline if this is approved.
It'll be under construction this summer, and we have a good construction season. We hopefully see some usage this summer.
Good.
It'll definitely be done this calendar year. The usage is kind of
Good.
here.
Thank you.
So there was no firm from Medina County that...
No, these are all publicly advertised.
Okay.
No firms of those.
Any further questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the income tax allocation with respect to the Joint Economic Development District dollars. I guess I submitted this a little bit to bring it to the floor for discussion. We are starting to receive funds. I believe they're billed in arrears, so last year it was around $44,000, I believe, that we received as our allocation or share of the JED monies that came in, and Montville Township received about $44,000. We'll look at about this year, hopefully to get around $60,000 each because the expenses were paid off, so maybe even a little bit more, maybe anywhere between $60,000 and $70,000 coming up in 2012. So the question is, this money as it currently stands comes into the income tax and falls under the income tax allocation. So every dollar that comes in gets spread amongst the various different funds that share in the income tax dollars. The question would be, do we want to continue to just have the money come into the income tax allocation formulas and be spread amongst the departments, or do we want to designate the dollars to go to a specific purpose? My suggestion would be, since the JED monies are used for economic development, and we have a lot of economic development activities occurring, and we have no funding source to fund the economic development projects except out of the general fund currently, that these monies be allocated to the economic development department to be used for various projects, and either land acquisition, revolving loan funds, other projects to help encourage economic development within the city or even within the JED areas. So anybody have any questions on that or ideas?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. The only concern I have is, as Keith has mentioned before, and you brought up also, that, for example, the Blake Elementary or the Waite Elementary School that's involved, we've got employees there that before the JED were previous city, are still city residents.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've mentioned before a percentage of tax dollars that out of that $40,000 that we've received this year out of the JED, that a percentage of that we would have already received if the JED wasn't in place because they're city residents. My concern is if it's significant, if it's a significant portion, maybe we should, instead of putting all the JED towards economic development, maybe we should, my point is I don't want the income tax, our normal income tax revenue shorted. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Do you, Jim, remember the percentage? Because I know it was the school.
Yeah, I was thinking, was it 60-40, Keith? But I'm not positive. I know I can.
Off the top of my head, I was thinking it was somewhere around there, but and we don't unfortunately know on the new members of the JED as it goes on what that percentage is.
Right.
I can certainly figure out, between the emails we had before and then updating it, I can figure out how many of the employees at those two buildings are already City of Medina residents and would have been paying it.
I mean, like I said, I'm wholeheartedly in favor of designating that to economic development. I just don't want the other, departments to be shorted in funding with.
Well, I think some of the questions had to deal with, especially with the schools, is fortunately or unfortunately, the higher paid employees don't necessarily live in a city all the time.
That's correct. The percentage I think it was 60-40 personnel in the city, but it was 40-60 money outside of the city, because that's fairly typical.
Okay.
The other thing is, and you're going to have to check with Mr. Huber on this, but the 0.25 or 20% of the income tax goes to the 108 fund by the ballot language, and I don't know if you can change that. The rest of it, council definitely has the authority to allocate however they see fit, but that portion you're going to have to check with Mr. Huber on.
So, Mr. Huber, I guess the question would be if you have adopted the income tax ordinance, I guess that's what we did, for the City of Medina, with respect to charging a 1.25% income tax in the areas that lie within the Joint Economic Development District. Is it required, we have to look at it by law, that if money comes into that, it must go, 20% of it must go into the Streets Fund 108 fund? I don't know. We probably have to look at that.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
So if that is the case, then really, if you look at the allocation we get, if we would get, let's say, $100,000, of course, 20% of that, or 20,000, it wouldn't go.
Right.
It'd have to go into, and that may help solve some of your issues about at least I guess it would go directly into the 108 fund. It can't be given any other department. And maybe we can look at the issue, but I think overall, the other departments, since the higher paid employees, especially at SUMA, and if university comes in, most likely they're not going to live in the city.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
I don't know if there would be that much of a direct hit unless we get a large retailers or something of that type where we have that, but that I don't anticipate that happening. But we can always visit it. But for a planning perspective, we need to do something. I think to help economic development from a funding source to get some of these projects done, because the goal would be by allocating the money to economic development will generate more money than is allocated to it to reimburse the city. so I don't think it's just to go out and never come back in. If it did that, then I think we're going in the wrong direction. But I don't think that would be.
Well, maybe we'd be safe then just at the initial to hold back 20% then.
Well, just have Mr. Huber check that out. But Keith may be correct that we have to do that.
I'm not sure. I just want to.
Well, we adopted the city ordinance to be applied to the JED district. And I don't know if the city ordinance includes any ballot link because there are no voters in the JED district. So the question would be, if there's no voters in the JED district, do you have to allocate that 20%? Because it's not a like the seat as a voting area. This is not a voting area, so it may not apply.
I would just like to echo Denny's original sentiment. Whatever word or a close estimate of what we otherwise be getting, I do believe that should go into the 108 fund. I don't think that should be rerouted to economic development. I mean, you can always revisit that later, but that just takes away from everyone all those funds that would have been there but for this.
But remember, your goal is to give money to get twice as much back.
Well, I guess if we see that payoff, you can definitely revisit it. But it wouldn't be.
I'm kind of in the same place with Denny and Andrea too, where maybe we start on even 50%, because even 50, you take the 20% off, then you split the balance 50-50. That's still 50% more in economic development than we've ever had in there. Just at least to start.
Well, remember, our projects are quite costly that we're talking about now.
Well, everyone else has to live in a budget. We can't just take it away from
Well, I don't,
that fund. And
granted, I don't think we're taking, my personal opinion is I don't think we're taking away anything from any other department. I think we're net ahead. There are some monies that come out of it with respect to city employees, but I think overall, the amount of funds coming in, we should be net ahead. And my only thought would be, I think we want to try to increase the economic development activity as much as we can, so we can even lower that burden, so we're not coming back in 2020 or 22. We're looking at to say, hey, we need more money. That was my only concern. As a taxpayer, I don't want to come back and say, I don't know. It's all up to the economic
change
development.
it later? I mean, if we say we want to do half and half,
it's up to you guys.
If we see economic development really needs it, we could probably change it down the road, but...
I'm in agreement with my colleagues here. We should keep a certain amount to current operating for the city, just so we don't lose what we already have and we gain. But I'm 100% for economic development, and I think we throw half of it or some agreed to percentage, we will get that money back, and it will grow. There's no doubt. But we have to keep the foundation and keep that solid, and I don't want to take away from it.
I'm close to everybody else. I mean, the money generated, we back out the 20% if we're obligated to. We back out the funds that Denny brought up. And that remaining amount, I think, should go to economic development. So,
Bill?
I would prefer that it went to infrastructure. I understand the need for economic development, but I also think that in the discussion that we had last week, I think, where we talked about, it may take, I think specifically it was talked about, it could take 10, 20 years to repair some of the streets that we have. We've got this money set aside, but clearly 10, 20 years if you live on a street, it's a long time to wait. So my thinking is, I support economic development. I support the Chamber of Commerce. I support those outside organizations that do it also. But I also think that any extra money that we have, particularly this money, because I think that also lends itself to economic development, the upkeep of the city. I think that if we can better maintain the streets, beyond the smart efforts that are taking place, that would be money well spent. And that is a literal and figurative, concrete. We know it will be there. It's not we hope there'll be a return, but we know there'll be a return.
The only thing to add to that is I know, we borrowed $10.8 million for the streets under the last bond issue for infrastructure improvements, plus we still get about $1.8 million a year on top of that, minus the debt service payment of about a third of that, which was about $600,000, so about 1.2 net.
You've got it confused a little bit. We bring in about 2.5, and then subtract the debt service payment out, so the net is 1.8.
Okay. So we have 1.8 a year coming in for infrastructure improvements. In addition, we just borrowed 10.8. Is that the right number? 10.8 million. So I understand what you're saying, but I guess the question would be, we have so many projects, I don't know if we can get them all done right now. I think there's a list that Patrick put together, and there's still more to occur. But with that $1.8 million a year, plus with the initial 10.8, we're going to hit a lot of the big ones.
And it's not just the big ones, John. Part of it's from our Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting last week, where we talked about sidewalks and wanted to do something about sidewalks. And that's something that's going to come to finance here still.
Okay.
To kind of follow up on. I think that's where...
Is that what you're getting at? What other infrastructure improvements are you referring to?
Well, I think they're all part of the same. I think the money that was set aside, that you set aside, I think is for streets, but it isn't for sidewalks and it isn't for streetscape. And I think that when you talk about economic development, and in the meeting that we did have last week, it came up, I think, over a number of times, I think, that we were looking at some streets that, by the time they get repaired, you're out a decade or a decade plus, I think is what was in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And that's the reality. So I think that any money that we can put into that in order to lessen that time, considering that if you live on that street that's 10 years out there, that's a chunk of time, and that's a chunk of your investment in your house that's being degraded. So that's just my opinion.
Well, I hear that at least, from what I hear from everybody else, is at least at 20% for sure, right, off the top of whatever money we get as a city from the JED, should go at least to the streets. Whether it's required to or not, that's what you want to have happen. And then what I also hear is whatever's remaining after that is split 50-50 between going into the regular income tax fund and then the 50% going to a new fund. I don't know how
You'd have to create a fund.
for economic development specifically.
Not only that, though, if we have economic development and we're investing in it, we're going to need funds to work with. I mean, we have to. The goal is to turn something around, so I would support that. If we have Kimberly Rice to get out there and get these ideas for us, if we can't ever implement them, if we don't fund it, I don't think she can even do her job. I mean, we have to get that money from somewhere, and since this was kind of designed for that, it kind of supports that.
I don't know that it was. Do you want to debate that, or just? I mean, is that just what you're saying? Or are you saying it just to me?
Well, I'm responding to you, but in general, through all of our meetings, that was rather the purpose of it was to create this funding zone for this type of project.
Just in my experience, economic development, though, is not. This is not economic development over here. Economic development, I mean, the city has 1,000 moving parts. All of those things contribute to the viability of that city in an economic sense, and they all need to be taken care of. And this is not saying, I'm glad Kimberly's here. I'm glad we have this department. I think the way it's organized is superlative. I think that's good. But I also think that the infrastructure and the street maintenance, as you have indicated by what you've done with that earlier when I wasn't here, is a huge undertaking. And if it cannot be addressed for 10 years or 20 years for some folks, I think that's where the money can go, and I think that's also economic development. I appreciate what you're saying.
The last thing I would share with you is when we talked about the bond refinance, pretty much at my understanding, we maxed out the projects that we could physically do at one point. We could throw as much money as we wanted because we had the option of setting up the money to go to whatever we wanted. And Mr. Patton said, hey, look, you can give me more money, but I'm just going to sit on it because we can only do so much work. So we're kind of tied, I think, on that end, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. For a number of projects a year we can handle.
Well, it's work and disruption to the city, too. I mean, you can only disrupt so many routes to folks and still maintain the traffic. The traffic doesn't stop because we're fixing the roads. So we have to balance.
But the money would accumulate. I'm sure there's other. You could bring an assistant in for an engineer. In fact, you had the funds available. We could probably do more. I mean, some of these streets I think are cul-de-sacs that would be less disruptive. But I think I've made my point. I don't want to belabor it.
So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, with Bill's idea, but everybody else's idea is that doing it. So if you have $50,000 this year, there would be $10,000 going to the street fund or 108 account specifically to address the issues. 50% after that of the $40,000 would go to the regular income tax allocation, and only $20,000 then would go to economic development for that year for economic development purposes.
And I didn't mean to open this can of worms. My only fear is I didn't want our income tax funds for the city to be shorted. If we find out, like you suggested, that the higher end incomes is not really affected our income tax area. I mean, I think within a short period of time, we've had a year under our belts now. It might only be affecting another 10% of the income tax. That's my only concern. I just don't want to throw.
And that's mostly going to just depend on the mix of businesses that come in.
Right.
We did talk.
And that can be readjusted. I'm not necessarily saying that we need to put 50% of. I do think that the street part of it, and Mr. Huber can find that out for sure. But even if it's not required, I do think if it's, we should set that 20%
So
aside.
is everybody comfortable with that kind of concept? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm the only one I think I'd put it all, but that's my opinion.
No, I'd take the 20% out for the 108,
sure.
And then the rest of it, if it's not being duplicated or if the general fund's not already losing because of what Teddy brought up, make that adjustment.
Right.
And the
That's going to be
go.
very hard to calculate.
Yeah, that's going to be an estimate. I mean, but it's mostly mixed of businesses. If it's mostly hospitals and doctor salaries, then it's going to mostly be money that we wouldn't have had any part of. If you get a retail store or a warehouse with a bunch of lower wage people, or those are going to be mostly people from the city, that's going to be a different.
But we can always readjust that.
So I guess we can visit it every year.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I have no
just
problem.
jumping off.
Right. Every year revisit it and discuss it maybe during the budget time and see, what are we looking at? Do we want to adjust it? But do we want to start at 50-50 and then look at it from there? Or what do you guys?
About 20% 108, 20% for the caution area, and then the rest of it goes to economic development.
60% economic development then?
Right. I mean, I'd be comfortable with that.
20, 60?
Okay.
Bill, I disagree with you. I think it's 100. You think you're at the other end. So that's okay. We both lose out on that. So the consensus is that we're going to do, and I guess we'll put together. We need some paperwork on this, and I don't know if Greg, who assists us to put together the allocation, because we have to do a new ordinance and create a new account.
You'll have to create a fund, which we have that because we've done it before, and we have to send a thing to the state auditor's office to get their approval for it, which is generally going to be allowed. And then you'll have to change the allocation on the income tax allocation ordinance to add a clause that the money that comes from the JED will be allocated 20% to the 108 fund, 20% per the regular allocation, and the balance to the new economic development fund.
Okay.
That'll be the step through on that.
I think if we can try to get that together by the end of March or the end of March meeting, I don't know who can assist. Yeah. Then we can start the allocation on that. And then we'll come and vote on that. Is that? I guess we're all pretty much that's the consensus of everybody. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments with respect to the income tax allocation? Kimberly, anything you want to add?
Well, yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. President. It kind of ties into the CIC discussion, which I know we haven't gotten to that on the agenda. But in terms of forming the CIC and possible funding sources for that, you may want to keep in mind if we do go the CIC route that these dollars could be set up in maybe an account under the CIC, which would be a nonprofit organization, and those monies could be used for revolving loan fund that could provide for gap financing, again, to buy the land and, full title and all those things that we've been talking about at the Economic Development Committee meetings. So I kind of agree with you about the 100%, but I also see everybody else's points, and I think keeping it flexible so that maybe we could build this economic development pot up so that when opportunities do present themselves in a prime corridor that we are trying to redevelop, that we have the money there to buy that property and be in a situation where we can move quickly versus now we only have $20,000 in this little pot of money and we're trying to buy property that costs $100,000. So my thought was if the CIC was formed and you had a funding mechanism and you had a substantial amount of money so that you could actually do something, maybe set it up that way temporarily and then slowly decrease the amount where it sounds like there's some other needs with the sidewalks and the infrastructure and all the other ideas out there on the table. But if you, and again, it's up to you, all of you, if you want redevelopment to happen in the city, you have to have a tool and a mechanism in place. This is an opportunity to fund something through the CIC, which I know we're not really on that, it's sort of out of order on the agenda, but those are just some of my thoughts.
Well, I would agree with you up to the point where I think the CIC should get the money that is, granted to or dispersed from the city to the CIC. I wouldn't want the money to go directly to the CIC because I don't know how easy it is to get it back. I think if we had projects that the CIC was going to handle, because you may have some non-CIC projects that you want to do, and you're going to have funding for those. So I'd rather do it the other way, where the money's set up in the account, and then if the CIC needs $25,000, we transfer $25,000 over, but there's still money left in the city, because if you have a city project that we're not going to put in the CIC, you still have money available to do that. And I'm just a little concerned that it may be more difficult to get it back than to give it. So, but that doesn't mean that if you request it, you're not going to get it. But I just don't want it to go directly into the CIC. And the other thing, as discussed, your second idea, I don't think it's going to happen, but we appreciate your comments. I think we'll start out with, because the consensus on council, I think they're not going to change to give you 100%.
Well, no, I was just throwing that out here, but yeah, no, I see what you're saying, and I think you can accomplish that through the ordinance process where council can designate.
But I think it's a great start. I think that finally, most cities don't even have anything akin to regular funding to economic development on a continual basis. Some do, but most don't. And some cities don't even have an economic development department. So I think this is a big move for the city from when I first got on council to now. Even most of the people on council, there was no such thing. So I think moving this forward, we are hopeful that, economic development and reinvestment and redevelopment within the downtown area, as what Bill brought up too, within the surrounding blocks of the downtown area, this will all help for that to occur.
Yeah, and I think when we had those presentations from the city of North Canton and the city of Worcester, North Canton's council appropriated $1 million over a 10-year period, and I forget whatever the increments were. It was a 10-year period, so there's a setup that way where there's the money there, and then they allocate so much to their CIC every year.
Well, it looks like at least what we're talking about with this allocation, your allocation will be probably closer, if nothing else happened in the JED, of $300,000 to $400,000 over the next 10 years, which I think is pretty good. And if we get the new hospital in, that would double.
The one thing I did want to point out, the thing that you commented about the getting it back, you're going to want to look at this allocation every year, because remember, when you put money into a fund, within the current year you can change that, but next year's council can't. So once you put this money into the economic development fund, it's there.
Right.
You can always change the allocation for the future income tax, but if that gets, if the JED were to get to the point where we're bringing in $500,000 a year, you're probably not going to want to put, I'm sure Kimberly would like it, but you're probably not going to want to put 60% of that into an economic development fund. You're at least going to want to talk about it.
No, appreciate it. So if we could get the ordinances together and what we need to do, Kathy, that'd be great. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Just real quick on Bill's point about additional improvements to infrastructure. We have projects already pinpointed for the bond money that we issued, but some of those projects are coming in lower than what Patrick estimates are. So, there is possibilities that, there's going to be one item later in the agenda that some of the money that we're saving from those projects we can redirect to other infrastructure concerns we have around the city. One of the things I'd like to do is, for some of the money saved in some of these projects, for instance, our concrete street repair we do every year, maybe beef that up even more, that some of those streets that might not be totally in disrepair, but maybe adding correcting a couple of different sections of that particular street that really improves the street altogether. It's not going to be brand new, but it'll bring some life back into that street for years to come. But I don't want you to think your point was lost, but we might have hopefully some other revenues to grab some of those additional infrastructure improvements.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the 1210, which is the 2010 and prior year carry forwards. We discussed this, that the easiest way to do it is to do it all at once, and we're probably going to have a meeting here, a second meeting, our finance meeting in March, to go over that, or if we can fit it in somewhere in March, to talk to the department heads, look at these numbers. I think Keith has the information for us that we can start looking at to make a determination. Everybody received an email with respect to all the carry forward numbers in all the different funds, and we'll probably do it all at once, because I know some of the departments have projects that they're counting on that money, which right now they really can't spend it because they technically can, because they can reallocate it, but it gets complicated. If they know they're going to get the money, they feel a little bit more comfortable spending it on the projects they want to spend on.
A couple points on this when you get to looking through this, because there's a lot of information here, as you can see by what's in front of me. All of the funds, all of the grant funds, we typically have not done carry forward in. So if you're looking through this and wondering what you don't probably need to look at those, because we're not probably going to do those. So that would be basically everything from 109, with the exception of 115 and 144, all the way down to the 380s. And then other than the auto mechanics fund, everything 600, numbered 600 and higher, we would not be doing. And in past years, we also did not do any hospitalization. So
and also the police didn't want to carry forward.
And the police didn't want theirs, and I believe Mike feels the same way with the rec center. So some of these you can knock out of here.
Okay.
So you don't have to review all 250 pages, what I sent you.
Could you put? I'm sorry.
If you would like, we can pull the departments that don't need the carryover, aren't counting on the carryover, and that would just eliminate those from discussion or consideration.
Sure. If you send us an email,
yes.
Whatever you have.
Yeah, and then I can take them out of this and send you a new one that's less pages.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
So don't print this.
could you? No, I wasn't going to print it, but I even have a hard time reading them. I guess it's because of my age. Did you leave a hard copy in council office? Thanks.
When we get the departments, it'll be a couple days, we'll get the departments that are taken out of this, and we'll take those pages out, so I won't give you the whole thing.
Okay.
I'll give you the.
Yeah, I'll have that too when I do the ordinance, so you guys can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
And his sheet already shows what was done 2010 prior, what was done in 2011. So you can know for budgeting purposes, the carry forward for 2011 is a combination of savings and or maybe, I don't want to say this word, over budgeting, but you have to look at the whole picture. You can frame it in your mind of what his history provided in some departments. You can definitely tell a buildup in the carry forward funds. Okay, the next item we have is item number 6, 12037, municipal tax refund.
This portion of the city income tax is collected by the state through the business gateway. They apparently over-collected, and they've notified us that we have to return this money, as you see by the letter attached. If we don't, we have to start paying interest on it. So I'd like your authorization. And it's the state that enforces that, so we really don't have a choice here.
Is this income tax paid by Frontier, or is this paid on behalf of their employees?
I couldn't even tell you. The state collects it from Frontier, whether it was... It may be that it was on behalf of their employees, and then they discovered that those employees don't actually work in Medina, or it could have been net profits tax. Either way, they would have to pay it to the state, and I don't have any of that information because it's the state. They give us a check for whatever it is.
Okay, and they send you a letter saying we want some back.
Yep. You pretty much have everything I have, and that's what we have to do. If I had more information, I'd give it to you, but with the state, this is what I get.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Keith, not to push you off a little bit, but we're going to do these other easy ones because yours is a discussion and it's going to be lengthy. So
I would assume that... All right.
Well, it's a big financing. It's going to be lengthy. So let's move to number 8, 12039, the budget amendment. Number 7619, the FedEx charges for the Champion Creek Trail.
Can we add to this while we're here? The purchase agreement for the South Broadway house is going to need an appropriation. We have the money in the fund, but we don't have it appropriated.
What would that... do you have the accounts? That would be number 5 on here?
It's the account listed on that, which is 3010707 54411. It's not a transfer, it's a new appropriation, so it's just to that one.
Coming from the capital.
That's the general purpose capital fund, correct. And it's listed here at estimated cost of $95,690, so we want to appropriate that.
And does that include all closing costs and everything? I don't think it does.
Let's make it $105.
$105.
It's appropriated, not authorized to spend. I mean, it's...
Sorry.
I think we can appropriate just so we have enough because there's going to be some give and take on the closing.
And otherwise, anything would have to come back to you for that's
just safely. I understand.
If it's not spent, it's going to stay in that 301 fund. It's not like it's going to be available for office parties or something.
And I think while we're on this one, Mr. Huber, if there's anything you need to add regarding the purchase agreement for the 406 South Broadway related to this.
Well, if you could, I'd like to pass the ordinance subject to my approval. The language in the contract is not complete yet. Pretty well there, but there's some language about naming something in the park after Mr. Rose's daughter. He'd like to include, and I haven't seen that language yet, so I need to receive that from him and formalize the contract. So the contract may change slightly.
And if you recall, the appraisal was done, the asking price is more in line with the county auditor's valuation of the property.
That's correct.
So there is a little difference between what our appraiser came up with and the purchase price of the property. Not much, but it's going in line with what the county auditor values the property at. And it says a little over an acre, I think, or a little under an acre.
I think it's a little over.
With the house, and it's an integral part of the whole Smith Road corridor, and I think we've talked about this, and it's a good start for the economic development encouragement in that area. So, okay, so we're going to add to the item the budget amendment, which would be number 5, which Keith mentioned, the money coming from general purpose capital, an amount of $105,000, which will be added to item number 7619, So the motion would include that amendment.
And it will also have to be added at the council meeting,
Okay.
because we're doing the purchase, authorizing the purchase to that committee
We'll do
appropriation.
an amendment to that one.
All right, move to approve these budget amendments with the addition of number 5, the appropriation for the purchase of $105,000.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I do.
Yes, go ahead.
You know, I looked at the property and did support it when it came up earlier. But, you know, the more I looked at the property and I looked at the project, it appears to me, I'm not sure exactly when this came up because I haven't been here as long as all of you have, but I don't want to say it's a random property, but the property is available and it is in the proximity of where the trail is. But my thinking about this trail project was that it would lead deeper into the city, in an area that, I don't want to say it's blighted, but in an area where the creek and the trail would probably lend themselves most to economic development and improvement. And considering that on Guilford Boulevard, we do have, in effect, we have a trailhead. I mean, we have a parking place on Guilford, and this trail is just across the street. That it might make some sense to let this property go and try to continue this into the next 2 blocks and use this money to try to continue the trail into the next 2 blocks in town, which I think would have a larger impact on the appearance of the city than where we're planning on putting it. When you really step back, I guess, and look at where this trailhead would be, I'm not sure it's the best spot to have it, and I also think that by ending the trail on South Broadway rather than getting it across South Court Street might be something we ought to rethink.
And the only thing I'll add, Bill, is that I agree with you. From the beginning, Craig Hanna and I have talked about taking it further, but right now those properties aren't necessarily for sale that we need. Craig, isn't that?
That's correct. The other thing is the trail, if you recall from the prior discussions, constricted so much because of the utility poles and the railroad.
Right.
So to keep it at the normal width of the rest of the trail, by having this here gives us that advantage as well. And then the third thing it does is we've been in talks with the community church adjacent there, who is also willing to give the city either an easement or a right-of-way for some land that they have adjacent that would then provide more land that would not be available otherwise if we step away from this. So those are just the considerations.
Right. I think I knew that, and I know what you're saying, but it appered to me that in the short time I've been here that we didn't retain a negotiator. We didn't have I'm not sure if I'm right about this or not, but we didn't have somebody who's in real estate. We didn't have somebody out negotiating for properties that aren't for sale. And while this is good, it's interesting. On the other hand, we're also taking a piece of property that we haven't decided whether we will keep or tear down or demolish the building that's there. Whereas there are properties, if we would keep going west, where there is nothing that would be, we wouldn't really have that a building that we tear down. I think that it's critical to the success of the project that it contribute to the downtown, and that it doesn't stop. If it stops at South Broadway, my concern is it will stop at South Broadway, and that'll be it.
So I would tell you, Bill, I think Mark and I, because that's where our words come together, and we're committed to taking it as far further west as we could.
And I appreciate that. But it's this.
Do you mind if I comment?
No, go ahead.
I've originally was the one trying to push for this additional purchase because I wasn't, we spent all this money on the first phase and now the second phase that's going to take you to Broadway, and I wasn't really excited about the end trail once it hits Broadway just because of what the mayor mentioned. And I felt that, putting an additional parking there, a trailhead that is somewhat close to the downtown area, to me it's going to allow more access for people to hop on the trail there, or they could use Guilford, or eventually someday when we have a loop that connects San Massey, there will be additional parking there. So, I mean, they're not large parking areas, but they're minor, and I just thought that, having something a little presentable in the uptown area that, would add to the enhancement of the city's trail, but, the people using it just don't come down and switch over to a sidewalk. There's something established there, nice little maybe kiosk talking about the trail and things of that nature. But, I think it's important. And just like Jim said, I don't think there's anybody here that anticipates that's going to be the end of it. We want it to meander through town, following Champion Creek for a portion of it west. But I think this is just going to be a great addition to an already existing popular trail, and I think it's well worth it myself.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, particularly what Jim's saying too. I know how much he's worked on this, but I mean, anticipation is it's nice, but anticipating your meal is not the same as eating. And I think that aren't we going to have property east of where this would be? I mean, I don't want to speak out loud if this isn't public, but aren't we having property just east of this with access apparently to...
Not right to the square, though. I mean, that's the big difference.
No, this doesn't go to the square either.
Well, it goes, you might as well throw a stone, you can hit the block of the square. So I understand what you're saying, too. And what I envision, though, I mean, if you can get this trail and maybe connect it with other trails, as Mark was saying, and you have these periodic stops, I mean, you can have a lot of other races, not necessarily to run in the street, they can run on the trails, and these could be down at Roscoe, there could be a stop. At this place, it'll be a stop, and maybe further on, it could be a loop that connects with the county park system somewhere, and that can be a bigger picture. But periodic stops with periodic parking, I always think is an advantage, because some people may not want to walk as far. Some people, we still can have an opportunity to have a parking lot down there in Leicester for the Leicester Trail. We have land available for a parking lot over there. We haven't done that yet. So there's all these different options that we could do, and I understand exactly what you're saying, but there's an opportunity that came up here for the money and for what we're getting. In my personal opinion, it's worth it. We can mold it into some other, whatever we want to use, the trailhead, some other kind of store, shop, museum, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of different options with respect to that building once it's determined if it's usable, I guess is the big question.
I have to agree with Jim and John, Mark, that anytime you make a project, you do it in chunks. You step by step, and then when an opportunity presents itself, you take advantage of it. And I believe that this is one of those opportunities, and this is one piece in the larger puzzle to make this an entire nice walking path, trail, whatever you want to call it. And I really think that if we don't take advantage of this, we may not have it again. And it's there. We should do it. And continue on. Don't stop here.
But I hear what you're saying, but I disagree because, I have been trying to improve that chunk of property, those 2 blocks between South Broadway and the north side of South Court Street since 1984. As a fairly young man, when we started to do that. Now I am on the edge of being not a young man.
It's called back nine.
And I appreciate what you're saying. We have an opportunity to buy this. We can put the trailhead in, but it is a trailhead. And my concern is that 30 years down the road, we still have an area that, in the most positive terms, is a fairly neglected kind of area. Not the businesses, but that little corridor. And short of improving that detracts, I think, from it. It is the trailhead purchase I'm talking about, not the trail. So.
Any other comments or questions? So we're gonna. That was a discussion. Right, a motion for which includes the amendment with the $105,000 added to the budget amendment as item number 5. We'd be voting on that, and of course we'll vote separately for item number 10, which is the purchase agreement. So Only thing we're voting on now is the modification to the appropriation of the amount, which adds the $105,000 to be appropriated with respect to the purchase of number 10. Everybody understand that?
Mm-hmm.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next item we have is, we're going to skip you for a second, Kimberly, sorry, is the purchase agreement for South Broadway. We heard a lot about that. Anybody have any other last questions with respect to the purchase agreement? And it would be subject to the law director review and approval.
Move to approve subject to the law director's final approval.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
Motion carries. The next item we have is, let's finish up 11 and 12, is this the 12042, the entertainment sponsor for Medina County Senior Day.
Okay, this is probably more a discussion right at this point. What this is I'm the City of Medina's representative on the Medina County Advisory Council on Aging, and I've been one of the representatives for a little over a year now. And I continue to ask, where the city could help out additionally in certain areas. And Laura from Office of Older Adults brought this to my attention about the entertainment sponsorship for Senior Day, and it's $600, and which is not a large amount of money. Sure, we haven't planned for this, but I wanted to throw it out there for discussion because Sandy Davis was able to provide me some dollar amounts of what the city has contributed toward, whether it be CDBG grants or out of pocket, towards senior initiatives in the city. And really, what I'm trying to do is compare how the city of Medina contributes towards seniors compared to Brunswick and Wadsworth. Wadsworth has its own senior center. Brunswick has a senior center within its rec center. So they're I think Wadsworth is probably, and I don't have those numbers yet, but Wadsworth's probably contributing a little more compared to Brunswick for a senior center. But we have the county senior center here within our city, so we're really blessed to have that within our city limits. So I just want to throw this out here. The deadline for the Office of Older Adults to know if we're going to sponsor or not is not until April 16th, so we have some time. I just wanted to throw it out there to see if the rest of council would even entertain to possibly be the sponsorship for that. And that entertainment's bringing out live music for the seniors that are there. And I urge, if you guys haven't had a chance to go to the senior center, it's at the county health building there on Northland. Come down and check it out. I mean, it's very active. A lot of people that do come there are City of Medina residents, but that's the gist of it right now. But like I said, this is just a discussion now. You guys don't have to vote on it.
Any questions?
I wouldn't support that, but I would support this. I just think Paul made a good point last week, and he's right. Some things are private, some things are public, and I couldn't do this. But I agree with you that it's a great place. On the other hand, excluding Andrew because she's leaving, if we, in all seriousness, if we want to put this money in, I would be, we all get paid. I would gladly put in $100. We can each put in $100, and we can put the ad in. I'd be happy to pay for it that way.
Bill, for once you and I agree.
I think we'll probably agree many times.
Because I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it yet.
No.
I know we do some things for the seniors, and we allocate, and there's all these projects that are very worthwhile, and we get a lot of requests like this. There's other programs we do which are not exactly like this. We have the snow plowing program. We do all these other different type of government-assisted programs for seniors. And I guess I don't know enough about that.
I wanted to throw it out there to get these first responses, just to get a feel. So I'm not.
Right.
And Mark, I just struggle a little bit with city funds going toward it. I know we try to help so many different organizations. I think Let's Make a Difference, what we do is we provide in-kind support to things like that go on. And I just think once we start down this path, there'll be lots of people who have really worthwhile projects that they would love to have a sponsor. And I just don't know if the city can do that financially. We are so good about helping anybody that needs anything with our
Well, Mark,
personnel.
unfortunately for you, I would support it, but I won't be here. So.
She was thinking on paying it off. Since she's not here.
All right, well, let's leave this on the agenda for next time so we can have a further discussion on it. Let's go back to item number 7, the 12038 for discussion. I believe it's just discussion on the 2002 debt issue refinancing.
Yes. I have some additional information for you because a couple of council members have asked about what debt service we currently have outstanding. So this is a summary of the total debt service.
So we have.
Oh, you might have that. This one's a little bigger because I'm looking at predicting.
And these documents tie in with all the stuff.
Right. Okay. You get one of these, I don't know. But as you know, we refinanced the 2001 debt issue at the end of 2010. This is a similar situation. Interest rates are favorable for us to refinance the 02 issue. The difference is last time that was an advance refunding where we financed it before it was callable. This would be a current refunding. The way that works is a little bit different than a home mortgage situation because we can't pay off these bonds except at certain times. The first one available to us on these bonds is typically, and in this case, it's 10 years. So it's December 1st, 2012. It's the 10-year payment. That's when we can pay these off. Last time we did an advance refunding, we have to have an escrow agent. There's some additional costs in the reporting and so on because you hold that money and then you pay them off. This would be a current refunding, which is fine as long as we do it within 90 days. One issue on the timing is that payment, December 1st, 2012, is right after the presidential election. We probably don't want to have a debt issue too close to the presidential election because the market can get a little screwy when you get close to the presidential election. People are trying to predict who's going to win, what effect that's going to have. We want to stay a little bit away from that. But the 90 days gets us out to September. We probably want to do this issue in the first or second week of September is when we would time to set this issue to go up. Right now, the interest rates are very favorable. We don't expect there to be any big changes between now and then, and I think I mentioned in the email that we're looking at probably about $85,000 a year in savings if we maintain those interest rates. The reason we're talking about this now, and it's a September thing, is that there's a lot of process we have to go through between now and when this debt issue is going to happen. We have typically bid out the bond counsel service because one of our council members is a partner of the firm that usually does that for us. We want to make sure we show no appearance of impropriety. Last time around, you had asked me that we bid out the bond underwriter service as well. So what I would be asking for at this point is, if we're in favor of doing this refinancing, that's what we need to do first to start the ball rolling, is get that process underway. It's an RFP to see qualifications and pick a bond counsel and a bond underwriter. There's a lot of information I put in front of you on the memo and on the sheet that I just gave you, but I suppose I can just take questions from there. And
one first question, bottom line, what is the net savings if we refinance per year? You say 85,000, that's net.
That's net. The way I asked them to price that out was, and it's ballpark because interest rates move, but the way I asked them to price it out was if we take all the costs of the refinancing and finance those over the 10 years of the issue, so that we will have no money, we will get no money, and we will pay no money at the time we do it. We'll just sign on the dotted line. And I said, and then after that's all said and done, what's our payment going to be compared to what it was? It's about $85,000 a year.
So it's $850,000 savings.
That's where interest rates are right now. I mean, interest rates are incredibly low right now.
And how long before we have to make the decision of whether to lock into the interest rate or not lock into the interest rate? Or do we float until September?
You're not going to lock in the interest rate until September.
So we can change our mind, or when do we have to commit?
Before September. And now, we talked about this, and bond counsel is going to be the one, once we get them picked, to really answer that question. But what you can do is you can authorize a debt issue where the underwriter and bond counsel and I have the authority on the day of the issue to say, it's no good, we're going to walk away. You understand? I mean, you could authorize it such that we don't have to do it. Ultimately it'd be my call. I don't have to do the issue. And then if we get to September and interest rates are up that day, and you've authorized me to look at it and decide yes or no, we get to that day and I say, okay, interest rates are up, we're going to walk away.
But since our Moody's ratings is higher than probably when these bonds were issued, we should get a more favorable interest rate.
There's 3 sources of savings. One is that the term is shorter. These bonds, when they were issued, were 11 to 20-year bonds. When we refinance, we'll be issuing 1 to 10-year bonds. The second thing is that the market interest rate is lower now than it was then. And the third thing is what you mentioned, that our credit rating is better now than it was when we sold these bonds in 2002. All three of those things, and it's really, that's why there's such a big savings here. Normally you get one or two on your side. We have all three on our side right now. I mean, everything, since we did the issue in 2002, everything that makes interest rates go down has happened. The term's gotten shorter, the rates have gotten lower, and our credit rating's going up. Everything's going the right way.
Greece helped us too, I think. Does anybody have any comments?
Is there any downside to it?
No, because we would authorize a refinancing, and then, like we talked about, I mean, normally there is a clause in there that the bond council writes up that if the interest rates go up between now and August or September when we would be approving this, we just wouldn't do it.
But other than that, I mean, there's no downside. You're just suggesting that if interest rates aren't low, then we wouldn't do it.
And we'd walk away.
And the only thing you need from us tonight, Keith, is the idea to start proceeding with advertising, doing the request for proposals.
Okay. And well, that's correct. And then as we go on that, I would also like to know, I mean, is there any thought on, do you want to do additional money? I don't think we do, but I want to put it out there. There's also, I mean, I recommended that we do it just over the 10 years that the issue that's there is. We could, if we wanted to, go out an additional 5 years. That would have a cash flow advantage currently, but you've got another 5 years worth of payments. I don't think that's what we want to do right now, but I did want to present the options to you. And as far as additional money, I don't think there's anything that we want to finance right now, but the reason I present it to you is just like we talked about in 2010, there's a savings to doing this all at once as opposed to doing 2 or 3 issues. So I just want to put
Well, I guess, hold on. I mean, I don't know about the new money stuff. If we can borrow money for as low as you think we can borrow for, I mean, I don't know why we wouldn't want to think about that a little bit to say, you know what, if this is historically low times, I mean, I guess the question is, under those bonds, do you have to spend it in a certain period of time? Do you have to do all this other stuff? Or
That's again going to be more of a bond council question. I can give you the basic contours. There are restrictions. It has to be spent within a certain amount of time. We're going to be back to talk to the engineer.
I mean, that's why we did the money for the streets, and because it was so feasible and economically viable for us to borrow that money at such a low rate that it actually enhances our ability to do some projects. And I mean, we never really talked about yet any kind of capital projects 5-10 years from now, but who knows? We probably should think about it. And maybe the question is, you have a savings, maybe you just refinance and take that savings so you can have a project that's worth $850,000 over the next, so many years.
Agreed, John.
That's going to be split between Rec Center Fund and Water Fund, because those are the two funds that were involved in the 2002 issue. That's where the savings.
We can expand the Rec Center.
Mike's throwing.
Put more courts in so we can have more events there. But okay.
If you do want to look into additional money, I mean, that's something we're going to talk to Patrick about. And
we have some time for that.
We have time for that. But again, we're at 10 years right now, so we're not taking off years of any bond payments because we're at 10 years now. Is that what you're saying?
Right. The way I've recommended is to not extend it, not shorten it, just refinance over the same period of time and take whatever savings we can.
Or borrow more money to equal those savings, or do whatever we want to do with respect to that. Anybody have any other questions? Administration?
If we could shorten them, what would the advantages to shorten? Can we shorten them? I guess is the first question.
Well, we could. I mean, if we wanted to, we could flat out pay off part of this with whatever cash we have. You don't have to refinance it. You can always pay cash. Interest rates are so low right now that I would recommend that because I don't think you're going to see them stay this low over the next 10 years. You could shorten it. There's two ways you can shorten the duration. One would be just to use the savings to shorten the duration of the debt. The advantage to that would be, even as low as interest rates are now, the 1-year rate is lower than the 2-year. I showed you that curve. The 2-year is lower than the 3, etc. So if you keep the payment the same, let's say we're saving $85,000 a year staying on the 10. If we say instead, okay, we want to go ahead and spend that $85,000 in the first year on principal, then that's going to save us interest in each of the additional years because you have less principal outstanding. So then in the second year, you want to spend that $85,000 plus whatever additional you saved towards paying it down. And by the time you get to year 10, so you'll have no savings at all in years 1 through 9. But then when you get to year 10, instead of $850, it's going to be compounded by the interest that you've saved because you paid it off early. So in year 10, instead of $850, it's going to be $875 or $900. But you're getting it 10 years away. That's the trade-off.
So
what you need from us right now is just the okay to go ahead and do it.
The RFP.
Right.
And there apparently is some interest in doing some additional money, so I need to talk to Patrick. And when
Well, we just didn't know. I guess the question is if you borrow money for that low of an amount, and we're a city who's able to do that, because most cities probably can't, maybe we get a better leverage effect than we would otherwise and not increase our liabilities side of the balance sheet, so to speak.
And it was commented on earlier at this meeting that some of the projects have come in below the engineer's estimate, and a lot of the reason for that is there's a lot of cities that aren't doing projects right now because they don't have the money. So these contractors are hungry for work, and we're getting good prices. That was a big part of why we did it in 2010, was to take advantage of those prices.
Mayor, any comments with respect to?
Yeah, my preference would be that we, if we have specific projects, if we don't have specific projects, I don't think there's any reason to borrow money. If we identify specific projects and have a revenue source to pay off the bond payments, then we can discuss those things. Keep in mind, as was discussed earlier, that a third of our 108 is going already for bond payments. So we can do more streets. We can increase that bond payment, for argument's sake, to 50%, but then that leaves 50% left. So that's a balance that we have to continue to monitor. But as far as projects of, we need this building, we need this, really from the administration standpoint, we're pretty pleased and happy where we are.
But the refinancing in general, without additional monies, that makes sense to you, and you'll start doing it.
If we can save $85,000 a year for the next 10 years, that's $850,000 we have for other projects without doing anything at all. I think that makes perfect sense, yes, sir.
Okay, so it sounds like everybody, Bill, any other additions? So it sounds like go ahead and start the process where we're going to refinance if it's feasible.
And then we need to figure out if we have anything else for this process going on the RFP.
I will work with Kathy on getting the RFP. We have one from bond counsel because we did that before, so we should be able to just dig that up, and then we'll have to come up with one for the underwriter, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. 12040, the Community Improvement Corporation, CIC. Kimberly?
Keith, do we need a vote for the RFP?
No.
We don't, since we don't actually have the RFP, we can't really show it. We'll be back with that fairly soon.
Kimberly?
Yes, thank you. Okay, the City of Medina's Economic Development Committee has been meeting over the past 10 months since I started. From what I understand, prior to my tenure with the city, there's been discussion about forming a community improvement corporation. And over the past 10 months, roughly, we've been looking at different options and different ideas and what might be a benefit. And for those of you that are not aware, Community Improvement Corporation is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. It's organized under Ohio Revised Code solely for the purpose of advancing, encouraging, and promoting industrial, economic, commercial, and civic development of a community or area. It is not a political subdivision of the state of Ohio, but may be designated by a municipal corporation to act as its agent for industrial, commercial distribution, and research and development. And I think I listed some of the benefits there. Probably one of the major ones would be holding title to real estate. Leasing the real estate without bidding procedures is typically required under city ordinance, which allows you to act a little more quickly and more competitively when working on different projects. It would also have the ability to administer a revolving loan fund, as we briefly discussed in the past, which would help with gap financing for different businesses. And also, it's important to help businesses obtain some state economic development assistance, as some programs do require local community participation, so this is another area it could also help out with. It could have a voice in all tax abatement applications and tax incentive applications, to set it up that way. And financially support economic development projects without the state and federal requirements of various loan programs offered through Development Jobs Ohio or CDBG. And a lot of times with the community development block grants, with the federal dollars, there are a lot of strings attached which make it difficult to help a bigger pool of people. So this will allow a little more flexibility. And basically, you're gaining control of land for redevelopment and reuse. So when we look at the Smith Road Champion Creek Corridor project and the city architecture proposal that they put together back in 2009, 2010, and looking to redevelopment that area, this is a way to purchase land, key properties for future redevelopment use. And I know Mr. Coyne and the mayor and I went out to the city of Kent. They have 4 redevelopment projects going on downtown right now. They have a similar organization as CDC. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. I thought they were the same exact thing, but I think there is a slight difference. But the point is that this is a key tool to promote and enhance economic development, do it, be more competitive, and move quicker than our normal processes. I did take a quick look at the State of Ohio Secretary website. There are 212 active CICs within the state already, so it's a pretty commonly used practice. Some of the samples that we reviewed for other cities were, as I mentioned, North Canton, and then also the city of Worcester. And they've done some pretty nice projects in both of those cities.
Anybody have any questions?
Greg, from your standpoint, what benefit legally does it provide us as opposed to not having this in connection with economic development?
Well, financially, we're not as the CIC is not as constrained as the city is with respect to bidding and disposing of property. John, that was one of the big issues we talked about, wasn't it?
Right. I think the concern was that you don't have to go through the bidding process of going for a competitive bid to either lease the land, like we talked about, or to sell the land. The CIC has the ability to enter into agreements without the public bidding process, and which means that if you have a specific interest developer, you want to get a project done, you can reach specific terms. The CIC has the flexibility to do that without the public bidding process or the hoops that you have to jump through to accomplish to get a project done if the city's involved in owning the real property. Here, the CIC would own it. So.
That's somewhat of a philosophical issue that those constraints are put in place for municipalities so as to stop the train. Everybody look at this, get it out to the voters, get some comment. Everybody's, the biggest problem I've seen in terms of issues of property since I've been law director is when the council does something and people feel they didn't get discussed about it because they didn't have time, didn't understand. So my advice has been for a while, discuss these things publicly as much as possible, put it out there and get input. And so that's where bidding and slowing the municipality down becomes something that became a part of the law. Now, you can accomplish that with the CIC by being very mindful of making sure that these issues involving property are heavily discussed publicly so that people have input and know what's going on. And then I think there's no problem. Bidding becomes cumbersome when, in my view, when you have to have the lowest bids, which is typically favored, but you end up situations where you're getting into a contract with people you don't quite know enough about, and then you get problems because it's the lowest bid, but it's not the best person you're dealing with. And the CIC is helpful in some of those regards. You are not quite as constrained.
How long does it take to set this up?
This is relatively boilerplate stuff. This does not take that long to do that.
I think it's just preparation of documents, adoption by an ordinance by council, so maybe 4 to 6 weeks through council action, formation, and adoption of the bylaws associated with it. And then the CIC, of course, is going to be operated by city officials.
One more question. As far as the CIC owning land, does that change our liability if something happened to somebody on that land? I think as a city we have sovereign immunity, at least to some extent. I may be incorrect. But does that change that aspect of owning things?
Well, if the CIC has city personnel on it and is controlled by the city, I would imagine that we would be insuring, and if we acquire a piece of property, we're advising our brokers that it's held by the CIC that we control.
So ultimately, no, it would not make any difference? Or you're not sure? I'm unclear.
Well, I've never asked our brokers that, so I guess I shouldn't say definitively, but I would think not. I'd have to probably talk to our insurance brokers to find out how they've handled it with other municipalities. I did talk to the law director down in Worcester about their CIC. He likes it. I think they insure through their regular liability broker any properties that they come into control. But I don't want to speak out of school. I'd have to talk to our broker and find out how well Wells Fargo looks at that.
Thank you.
I have another question.
One question, I'm not clear. The CIC can obtain property, sell property, but the actual execution of the funding, say you want to buy a piece of property for $100,000, does the CIC have the authority to just go out and write the check and pay for it, or do they have to come to the council for authorization?
I believe the CIC is made up of representatives. The board of the CIC is representatives of the city. The CIC only has the money that the CIC would have either by self-generation or the money that is allocated and given to the CIC from the city. So the control is, if council doesn't give the money to the CIC has no money to spend. So that's where I think the control is. And the other control would be representatives from the administration and council, or I think that serve on the board, and they make the ultimate decisions on what the CIC would do.
So then with what you're saying, we could have a certain amount of control by making sure that they have a small amount of money in their fund, and if they want to buy something that's greater than their fund, they'd have to come to us.
Correct.
For the authorization. So we could maintain a certain level of control. They couldn't just go out and
unless they
buy
raise
a
the
couple
money,
of donut shops or
right,
something.
unless they raise the money some other way.
Right.
Which again, if they did that, I think we'd all be happy. But
Yes,
it's
yes,
mainly,
we would.
It's mainly
Yes,
funding
we would.
from the
That's
city.
the intent of this.
Paul,
Just so
to
you're
give
clear,
you
the boards are only 2/5. Usually the members of the board are 2/5 elected officials. The other, so if you got 5 board members, 2 are from the city, 3 are from are appointed, but they're not elected officials.
Appointed by whom?
That is something that, we have kind of a drafted one that George Sarkis is setting up, but how we're going to set up the appointment process is one of the issues that's not resolved. We have to nail that down as to what we want to set up.
Okay. So council could potentially lose a lot of control in connection with this. I would think we have to be very mindful of that.
I mean, I guess the control is what we adopt as far as the bylaws are concerned, what procedures we adopt for the authority given to the CIC to take certain actions without any type of other approval. I think there's some flexibility in drafting the documents to draft them to give as much control or as little control as you want.
As restrictive or not. The other thing is, just for those that haven't had a chance to read through all the documents, it also has to be approved through the Secretary of State's office once it's completed and filed. So there is some review.
Is that rather a stamp process, like corporation type thing?
I think the review is not that they necessarily agree with it, but it meets the state standards.
Okay.
Ms. Kimberly?
Just to maybe answer some of those questions that Paul and Andrea had. For example, North Canton CIC, how they're configured, they have 8 members. You could set up however many numbers you want, but for North Canton, they have the mayor, the president of council, chairperson of council's community economic development committee, the North Canton administrator, North Canton finance director, 1 member appointed by council, and 2 members appointed by the mayor. So that's how theirs is set up. We could also look at Worcester to see how they have theirs set up as well. And then also, the CIC is accountable, so they do get audited by the state every year.
Well, I'm not worried about them running off with the money. I just want to be in control of the money.
I guess the question would be if we can have, either George or somebody come in, give us the options as council, we make the determination of which direction we want the CIC to go, give them the direction of how to draft the bylaws and covenants associated with the CIC. That'll give everybody here at council comfort of the operational aspect of the CIC. But I think I didn't hear anybody on council say they disagree with the concept of the CIC and the flexibility that it offers.
I agree with the flexibility, but I'm not sure I agree with the loss of public input. It's like Craig was saying, these things are in place for a reason. There's a reason we have the bidding process and the processes that we go to ensure that the public has input. And if we are then creating a group, in effect, a nonprofit that is controlled by us, which is sort of like just taking us and putting us over here, but we no longer have those safeguards in place.
I think we can achieve the public input part of it by keeping the amount of funds limited, and any time that they need to make large purchases, they have to come to council for an appropriation. We can have that public discussion at that time. I think we can keep that open for them that way.
Well, why don't we have, like I said, again, have George come in, Mr. Huber, or the attorney, so we can ask the questions and make sure that we fully understand the ramifications. Is that possible, Mayor, or no?
That's possible. That's going to be a little bit more costly, I think, because when we bring Mr. Sarkis here, he's going to be asked to go in a variety of different directions. It may be better if we have him put together the standard language. We bring it back to you. You tell us we'd rather have this, or we'd rather change this, or restrict this, or expand that. Okay. We go back to George. If you understand why I'm saying.
I'm a little concerned about doing it that way, only because I suspect more than just me is it lacks knowledge.
You're not going to be here.
Well, I may not be here, but I worry we lack knowledge. So if you just bring us sample language, we won't really know what our choices are.
Well, I guess the question will be we should read it first.
There are some that are standard boilerplate from the revised code. To set it up, you have to have X. Okay, now we can ask him to give us a variety then of some other things. My fear with him is he gave us a price of $6,500 to $7,000 to do this, and what he's done in other areas. The problem is, though, if we bring him down here and we spin him in a direction, he'll write that for us, and then we come back, and then somebody else has another idea, and we can do that for quite a while and pay a lot of money.
If he just came in and could speak to it,
first,
to some degree, that would be my thing. I won't be here, obviously, but you don't know what your options are. If you offer me black and white, and I didn't know that I had 5 other colors to choose from.
Really, I would recommend that he do that, because I asked him to help us put this together. I'm not a transaction lawyer. I'm a litigator, and so I don't know all the ins and outs as well as he does. And if you have questions, I don't think you charge us that much, Mayor, for at least a meeting to get some of these questions out on the table. I think you might cut to the chase a little better.
I think we'll do it for free.
You can talk to him about that.
That's John. He's John.
Well, one last question. I think the question is if you could move that, get some information, and if you can do it, how much, and maybe that would be a starting point just to ask some questions, get a better understanding, so he knows where council's coming from and the administration, and prepare the documents for review. It might be, as Mr. Huber said, a good thing. We got to go pretty quick here, but there's one other thing that wasn't on the finance agenda, which will be on the council agenda tonight, is the airport grant requirement. If we recall, Ordinance 12027 passed on 213 of the airport runway rehab. It was a 5% match or $40,000 that we agreed to. Mr. Huber found out that the federal government's requiring a 10% match, which doubles the amount we have to give, which is $80,000, of which the fund does not readily have available. So additional money will have to be given in order to get the grant. And the grant is how much again? $150,000?
Well, the total project's $800,000, and this is a result of a bill that they just signed last week that changes the match amount. And I got a call from the FAA this afternoon telling me that we thought $40,000 to do this project would be our match. It looks like it's going to be $80,000.
80 for 800 still sounds like, I mean, for the work that's
Right.
going to be completed, that still sounds
Downside
like a
is if
great
we don't go
deal.
forward, we're going to lose the money that I saved up because they'll take a chunk of that money and give it to another airport if we don't do the project. So that's the route.
Well, the only issue I have too is we've already dedicated or committed ourselves to do the improvement with the jet fuel, and we're spending a lot of money doing that, and we have an agreement to get paid back on that. So if we don't do this, there's no use of doing the other.
Right.
Because the runway and the jet fuel, they kind of go hand in hand. If you want planes to come in, you need to have a pretty good runway.
We don't really have an agreement, though, on
The payback?
payback we'll get from the jet fuel.
I think we have an outline of what it's going to
But we don't have an agreement.
in place.
So we're
We're still putting it together. We've got an agreement with the helicopter company.
but we've lent $150,000, right, to build the jet fuel tank.
I think it was only 40 right now with respect to the water lines.
Sewer.
The
It's the
sewer.
only thing we've committed dollars to.
The only thing we committed dollars to is the 40,000, and they're doing that. But I guess that what Greg's mentioning is we don't do this, next year, odds are we're not going to have the amount of grant money coming from the federal government, because they're going to say they're not interested in any more, we'll allocate it to another city. And that's the risk, I guess, is that if you get $80,000 for 800, next year they might say, we'll only give you 100,000. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but I'm sure, as you mentioned, we're not going to be in the same light as we would be if we went with the grant.
Well, I can't speak for them. I don't know that they would look at it quite that way or that harshly, but what we do lose is the money that we have saved up. I have about $580,000 saved up, rolled over from the last 4 years. If we don't move forward with this now, I'll lose $200,000 out of that $500,000 they'll pull out and give to somebody else because we're not going forward. That's what our immediate loss will be.
So if we don't do the extra 40,000, we lose 200.
Right. 200 plus what they were going to add to it to bring the project to fruition.
That's the other aspect, is he's going to pull $200,000. We've got about $580,000 saved up on an $800,000 project. He's going to pull some money additional to see this project's done from a pot of money he has available to do that in his discretion, if he thinks it's necessary. And he's telling me he thinks that the runway is necessary. We got to get on it. So he's going to find the money. So I apologize, didn't know this was going to happen at all until I got the phone call this afternoon.
And I'm okay, John, I understand this, and I don't want to lose this, but where's the other 40 coming from?
That's the question.
That's for you guys to tell me, because I don't know. I didn't budget for it.
Well,
So are we ready to pass this tonight when we don't know where
Do
the...
you need it tonight? I guess is the question. When do you got to get the answer by?
If you pass this ordinance, we're going to be letting it for bid. That's why I was talking to you. I got the sense from Keith that that's not a big problem.
In the short term, we have the money in the airport fund. I'd have to double check, but I think we had 100. Last time when we checked for the line for the sewer, it was 100,000. We haven't spent that much since then, so we have it. It's more of, I think, a long-term issue that if our match is 10% from now on instead of 5%, then that 150,000 they allocate to us.
Well, it's assuming that we have to go, if we do another grant of 10% in the future, I guess that's still an option that we can say no to. But in the immediate term, it sounds like the runway needs to be done, and I would take it out of the airport fund.
Right.
And then we can figure out in the future if we want to do it again or not. Because you have to have a good runway. I mean, what are you going to do? So,
That's right.
yeah. All right, I think everybody okay with that?
I'm not.
You're not?
I would say no.
You would say no? Okay, we're going to vote on that. So, any further discussion? Got a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
This is to approve the modification from 5 to 10%, making it from 40 to 80,000. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
The motion carries. Okay, let's go up to council since we're right on time.